It's April 19th, 2012, and we're here at the Specialty Health offices. We're preparing actually for the conference tonight that we're calling the Cancer Conference, and many of the people here, all of you are going to be there, and some of you are featured speakers. But we wanted to take advantage of the fact that we have you here together to go back to Good Calories, Bad Calories, and especially Chapter 13 that Gary Taubes wrote in Good Calories, Bad Calories. That's the chapter on dementia, cancer, and aging, and we thought Chapter 13 was a spectacular chapter. When we read Chapter 13, what year did you write?
Oh,
Chapter
probably 2005.
In 2005, you knew so much about lipoproteins. We were incredibly impressed about that. And then you started talking about cancer and dementia and aging. And I remember reading that, and I was stunned by the connections you were making to dementia and to Alzheimer's. So what we did was we copied the dementia and Alzheimer's portion of Chapter 13 and sent them over to our friends, the neurologists, Drs. Bacchus and Quaglieri, and had them read that portion of Chapter 13. This is what Dr. Quaglieri, Dr. Bacchus' partner, said. I reviewed the chapter in the book you provided. This man is right on. The theories about insulin and Alzheimer's have been well known for a while. Coincidentally, in our Journal of Neurology, this is recently reported on. This is not theory anymore. It is fact. And I have enclosed an article for your perusal. Who were you talking to when you wrote Chapter 13? And where did you come up with all those incredible ideas that are so important?
Well, there's been as your neurologist said, over the past decade, past 15 years, say, there's been a increasing flow of articles linking insulin to Alzheimer's, to dementia in general. And one of the fundamental switches here, one of the things that prompted me to do this book is this idea that's been known for a while. In the book I quote Rudolf Tanzi of Harvard saying what's good for the brain is what's good for the heart is good for the brain. And that's because in the 1990s we realized that heart disease and Alzheimer's disease share a host of risk factors together. So they share, hypertension, atherosclerosis, smoking, and then we began to learn through large population studies that diabetics are at a much higher risk of both the kind of vascular dementia that's common and from stroke damage, as well as from Alzheimer's disease. And it came around to this fundamental notion that it's interesting the way the public health authorities in general took it, obviously. As soon as they heard what's good for the heart is good for the brain, then that means we should all be eating low-fat diets and low-salt diets, because they're thinking this is what's good for the heart and the dietary fat is a problem. But meanwhile, we've been learning all about this condition known as insulin resistance and metabolic syndrome. So by today, well, we know if you've got if you're at risk for heart disease, it's because you've got insulin resistance. You've got this metabolic syndrome, this cluster of abnormalities that Dr. Dahl is going to talk about. And so when you're insulin resistant, you're at high levels your insulin levels tend to be elevated more during the course of the day. And what's interesting, again, the actual mechanism by which this believed to happen has changed over the past half dozen years, but insulin plays many key roles even in the brain. And when you're insulin resistant, your brain actually becomes insulin resistant as well. So they could see in studies that insulin levels in the brain start to go down, even while insulin levels in the body are elevated. And again, insulin plays key roles. It plays key roles in memory, and then it plays key roles in regulating both the production and clearance of the particular particles in the brain that seem to be the major cause of the dementia and Alzheimer's. That's the amyloid beta particle and the tau particle. Amyloid beta collects into plaques. tau collects into what are called neurofibrillary tangles, and it's this pathology that you see in the brain, unfortunately, on autopsy that makes it clear that this person had Alzheimer's. And so there's a lot of research now, very compelling research, saying, look, when you become insulin resistant in the body, the brain starts to become insulin resistant. Insulin levels actually start to decrease in the brain and central nervous system. And this, in turn, leads to either increased production, for instance, of this amyloid beta protein, or decreased clearance of the protein through a mechanism, enzyme that's actually known as insulin degrading enzyme. And as these proteins, as the amyloid beta and the tau start to in effect clutter up the extracellular, intracellular space, and you get these symptoms of Alzheimer's. And it's fairly compelling work. And again, the message, if you just think of it as a message being what's true for the heart is true for the brain, we now know pretty much what's true for the heart, which is to keep insulin levels as low as possible. And if that's true for the brain as well, it's telling us what to do about Alzheimer's and probably what causes it, which are those nutrients in the diet that trigger elevated levels of insulin, so the carbohydrate content of the diet in particular.